Okay, it's 12:01. I want to welcome everybody to the Greater Vernon Chamber of Commerce Town Hall with the Honorable Candice Bergen, Leader of the Official Opposition, and as well we're joined by our Member of Parliament, Mel Arnold. I'm Dan Prue, the General Manager of the Greater Vernon Chamber of Commerce, and I'll be moderating today's Town Hall from the traditional unceded territory of the Okanagan Silks peoples. We are proud to be able to offer these opportunities for our members to be able to connect with and hear from elected officials. And given our tight timeline, I'll just get right into introductions. So I'd like to introduce Mel Arnold, Member of Parliament for North Okanagan-Shuswap. Mel was first elected as MP for North Okanagan-Shuswap in October of 2015 and re-elected in October 2019 and September 2021. Mel is currently Deputy Shadow Minister of Fisheries, Oceans, and the Canadian Coast Guard, and was the Vice Chair of the BC Yukon Conservative Caucus during the 42nd Parliament. Mel has been a member of the Standing Committee for Fisheries and Oceans since January of 2016. Prior to being elected, Mel was a longtime business owner in Salmon Arm and served as a volunteer with many not-for-profit organizations. Mr. Arnold, I will give you the honor of introducing our special guest today.
Well, thank you, Dan. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today, and thank you to the Greater Vernon Chamber of Commerce for hosting this event. At the outset, I'm compelled to acknowledge the ongoing crisis in Ukraine. Russia's invasion of Ukraine is perhaps the greatest threat to global security since the end of the Cold War, and a serious violation of international law and stability. Over 1 million Canadians have ties to the Ukraine. We stand with them, the people of Ukraine, and we all hope for a swift and peaceful resolution to this conflict. But on to today's agenda. It is an honor today to participate as your Member of Parliament, and a pleasure to introduce today's guest, special guest, my colleague, the Leader of the Conservative Party of Canada and Her Majesty's Official Opposition, the Honourable Candice Bergen. Candice began her political career as a party organizer before seeking her first election in 2008, and has proudly served the people of Portage-Liscar as their Member of Parliament for the past 14 years. She has served as Canadians as Parliamentary Secretary for the Minister of Public Safety and Minister of State for Social Development, where she worked to improve Canada's efforts to fight homelessness and ensure more support for those living with disabilities. She also served as the Opposition House Leader and Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party. That's the official side of Candice, but I'll provide that I also personally know Candice as a great listener, someone who seeks common ground where everyone feels their voice matters, and someone who regards the interests of Canadians and our country with great importance. Having worked with Candice since 2015, I'm confident that she'll take what she hears from you today and continue to work with me and our fellow parliamentarians across all party lines to achieve results. We look forward to your input today, as it will assist us in our roles of advocating on your behalf on issues that matter to you, your business, and your families. So without further ado, I would like to introduce to you the Honourable Candice Bergen.
Thanks so much, Mel. I appreciate that introduction. And I wish I could say great to actually see each one of you, but here we are virtually. And I hope sooner rather than later, we can get together in person. I think it's good that we've now figured out how to have these kinds of virtual meetings. And so when we can't be together, we can do these things. But I think we all like the in-person better. We can look in each other's eyes and see each other's smiling or frowning faces, but hopefully smiling. And so I'm looking forward to that. Mel, thanks for inviting me. I just appreciate Mel Arnold so much. And I think, I'm sure you know this, but I think he is one of the most well-liked, well-respected, knowledgeable members of Parliament that we have in Ottawa and certainly in our caucus. So you're lucky to have him representing you. And I'm very, very lucky that he and Linda are friends of mine and my husband, Michael's. So we feel blessed to know them. And I think you are very blessed to have them as your MP. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of things that I could touch on. I became the leader of the party, I guess, not even a month ago, and it wasn't something that I had planned. But as our democracy and our party has it, if there's an absence of a leader, there immediately becomes a vote for a new leader, for an interim leader. And I recognized that there was a need for a leader and that I could fill that need. And so I feel absolutely honored and privileged that caucus chose me as their leader. And we definitely did not pause even for a moment. We went from a Wednesday meeting where I was voted in at about 7, 8 o'clock at night. And the next day we began immediately again in Parliament. And there was not a boring moment. We were in the middle of, as you all know, protests going on in Ottawa, borders being blocked, truckers and many of their supporters not happy with being called names by the government, restrictions, etc. We went from that to the Emergencies Act and dealing with that, and even having a vote of confidence attached to the Emergencies Act being invoked. And then we went from that to another incredibly serious thing that is gripping the world, and that's, as Mel already talked about, the invasion of Ukraine by Vladimir Putin, a brutal, barbaric, I would say probably very mentally unstable individual who is very dangerous. And so I want to speak briefly about that. I want to speak a little bit about some of the things that have gone on in Ottawa, the implications, and then talk a bit about things that I think affect you in terms of the financial security of Canada. So I want to say this about what's happening in Ukraine. You know, make no mistake, when Putin invades Ukraine and breaks all of our, not only our world order laws, but also the human laws that we as humans believe in, value, sovereign nations being sovereign, democracies being democratic. When he breaks all of those rules, if he thinks he can do it to Ukraine, he can do it to any country. And that's why it's so important that together we do what we've been doing. And I'm very glad the government of Canada has stepped forward and imposed sanctions. But we as a world have to come together against Putin and not let him get away with this. We have to stand with Ukraine. We have to stand against aggression and stand with the people of Ukraine. We, as Conservatives, have suggested a number of things that we'd like to see happen very quickly. We'd like to see the Russian ambassador expelled, and we would like to see our ambassador recalled back. We also, and we're seeing this happen already, Russian Today is a television network that is really just Putin's propaganda. It's broadcast here in Canada. We'd like to see it pulled off the airwaves, and that's starting to happen. We also would like to see Putin further isolated on the world stage. Someone like him and the regime that he leads, we don't believe deserves a spot in the G20 or OSCE or I would say even the United Nations. So we'd like to see a push for that. And then we also would like to have the ability for Ukrainians to come to Canada visa-free so that they can come, find sanctuary. We don't think Ukrainian people want to be permanent refugees. They want to live in their own peaceful and sovereign nation. But we believe Canada can be a place of safe haven and refuge for them in the time being, the short time being. In the bigger picture, I think this gives us, though, an opportunity as a nation to talk about a couple of other very serious things that have been neglected by the current government. First of all, our Arctic sovereignty. We share a very large border with Russia. And if we think that somehow we are immune to his aggression, I think it would be very naive. And it's high time the current government recognizes that our Arctic sovereignty is vitally important to the security of Canada. So whether it's building up, getting our F-35s in place, whether it's increasing our funding and working on our on NATO with NATO allies, there's other things that we can do to shore up our Arctic sovereignty and show Russia that we're serious and that we're not just ignoring that part of who we are as Canadians. Then the other issue that has to be addressed is the issue of oil and gas. Right now, Russia provides the majority of oil and gas primarily that Europe uses is provided by Russia. And that means Russia now basically holds that over Europe's head and other countries, where if they're going to cut off Russian gas, they're going to freeze. They're going to have no energy. So this is the situation we're in. while at the same time, Canada has 40% of the gas in the world, natural gas in the world, that could be exported and used by countries like Europe. So when the current government says they want to shut down Canada's oil and gas sector, all in the name of, let's say, the environment, while at the same time allowing and seeing countries like Russia sell oil and gas to Europe, the only country that is being helped by that kind of policy is Russia. We're not helping Canada. We're not helping Europe. We're not helping climate in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions or addressing climate change. And we're certainly not helping contribute to world peace. So there are a lot of reasons that it's time we get pipelines built right across the country and start having the ability to sell Canadian oil and gas to the world and displace Russian oil and gas. So I want to leave that with you. I'm interested in your thoughts, and I want to even let Mel know your thoughts on that. That's what conservatives believe. I'm going to switch topics now briefly because I know we're a little short on time. I want to talk a little bit about coming out of COVID. I think it's very, very good and encouraging to see many provinces across the country starting to lift restrictions and mandates and do it quickly. Conservatives believe that this shouldn't be a long, drawn-out process. We should follow the recommendations of our health officials. We should follow the science and the evidence. And the soonest we can lift restrictions and mandates, the better. We're asking the federal government to do the same thing. I think especially when it comes to things like tourism and seeing people being able to fly in and out of Canada freely. Obviously, we want it done in a safe, responsible way, but we believe the sooner that we can see restrictions lifted federally, the better. I do want to really commend all of you. I've heard some really good things about how the Chamber has worked to pull the community together. You've consistently asked for clarity on regulations, and you've urged the community, your community, to support local businesses. And I know even in Manitoba, we've seen chambers play such a huge role during the pandemic, ensuring that there was clarity, and there has been so much confusion for businesses. And how hard is it for you folks to open up, shut down, open up, the back and the forth, and what is the rule this week and what is the rule next week? It's got to be so frustrating. So I really commend the Chamber of Commerce in the local ones and you especially, and I'm also thinking of the ones in my area. You've been fantastic, just providing that support and then really encouraging, having a positive outlook in what can be a very, very difficult time. So thank you for that. I want to tell you though, Conservatives are very committed to seeing restrictions and mandates lifted. And we are disappointed that in many ways it's been used as a political wedge to stigmatize and divide people. We don't believe that's what leadership should do. We think we should be encouraging people to make the right decisions around their health. We think that we should be encouraging people to do the right things for their families, for their businesses, but no politician should use a pandemic or even the issues around vaccines to divide and pit one group of Canadians against another. That's wrong, and it's something that we will never do, and we will call it out when we see it. I want to speak briefly about inflation. It was at the top of our priority list prior to Christmas, and then as we just outlined, there's been a lot of things that have happened, but inflation is not going away. January, it's at a 30-year high, 5.1%. That means the cost of everything is going up. You folks are seeing it with gas prices. The price of gas, unbelievable. And it's not fair and it's not right to be making small businesses pay this kind of cost. Never mind, you think about seniors or single parents or just middle-class families who are working to pay the bills, maybe put their kids and get their kids to university, and the price of everything is going up. And I just read a report today that I think it's 53% of Canadians are very concerned about how they're going to be paying even just their rent, their condo fees, groceries, everything's going up. So as Conservatives, we believe that there is some things that the government can do. So far, the government's kind of been throwing up their hands and saying it's not our problem. Inflation is a global problem. But even experts in Canada are saying that when the government continues to spend and spend and spend to the extent that the Liberals are spending, that increases inflation, that causes inflation to grow. And when the government has no plan to return to some responsible fiscal policy, that also causes problems in terms of inflation growth. So those are things that we'd like to see brought under control. The government needs to stop printing money, stop the excessive spending. Targeted support we absolutely believed in, and we still do. But we even know, and I know some of the questions that I was given from you folks had to do with labor market and how do we get people back to work, because you need people working. I know different sectors, even here in Manitoba, and you must be having the same challenges. Different sectors are really struggling to get folks to come to work because of some of the supports. They actually were more conducive to paying people to stay home than getting people to go to work. So that's something that we have to see come to an end very quickly. We have to encourage people to take the jobs that are available. We want to see people working right across the country in every sector of our country. We should not have one area of Canada working and another area of the country laid off and just striving to be able to work. We want to see people working in every area of the country in every sector. We also are very opposed to the recent tax hikes that the government's brought in. We don't believe that the payroll tax hike is a good thing. We actually asked the government to cancel the January 1st payroll tax hike. Just another burden on small businesses. Conservatives believe strongly in the contribution small businesses make to our economy. In my riding, again, I'm a Southern Manitoba rural riding. Most of our small businesses, we're not talking about businesses that employ 40, 50 people. They employ 2, 3, 4, 5 people. So they pay themselves and maybe their family member has a job, and then a couple of people from the community. But those are really important to our economy. They're important to our rural economies and our global economies. So we believe small businesses are vital, and we've seen the Liberals try to attack them. Conservatives have stood up for small businesses, and we won't stop standing up for you, because many times we're representing you. We're from rural ridings. We're from ridings where your small businesses are literally ensuring that we have jobs in our areas. I want to talk just very briefly as well. We had the Emergency Act invoked. We had the emergencies measures invoked recently, which I think, folks, sets a very dangerous precedent. The government had the tools, they had the laws in place that they needed to move the illegal blockades and the protesters. The fact is, the blockades at the borders moved before the Emergencies Act was invoked, and they should have been, and we're very glad that they were removed. Police did their job, and they moved out the trucks and the other blockades. The police and law enforcement had the same tools available to them here in Ottawa, and for whatever reason, they didn't use them fast enough. But that's not an excuse to use the Emergencies Act. The Emergencies Act is basically a sledgehammer taking away the rights of Canadians, and it's a very dangerous precedent. So I think the fact that Trudeau invoked it, forced a vote on it just last Monday night, a vote that was a confidence vote. He said, if you vote against this, it's confidence, which means we would go to an election. Even the next day, his ministers were saying how dire it was that they needed to possibly extend it past the 30 days. And then less than 24 hours later, revoked it. That shows a very scattered approach. And I would say what it shows is they didn't need it when they invoked it on February 14th. They didn't need it on Monday, the last Monday, and they didn't need it, and that's why they pulled it. So we have a lot of questions we want to ask about that, but we know right now we're here for a week in Ottawa. Ukraine is top of mind for everyone. So this week is going to be spent on Ukraine, how we can help the people of Ukraine, how we can stand up against Putin. But you're going to see us, as we talk about that issue, you'll hear us talking more about Canadian oil and gas. You will hear us talking about Arctic sovereignty. And then you will continue to hear us talk about inflation, strong fiscal policy, and then holding the government to account when they do things that we believe overstep and overreach, which is what we've seen them do recently. So that's in a nutshell what I wanted to talk with you about. I know Dan had a few questions, and so and you may have more questions around housing and things like that. I'm going to let Dan go ahead and ask me that, and then I'm going to answer it to the best of my ability. But thank you very much for being here. Looks like there's 45 of you on here. And again, I wish I could see you. And I hope I can come to Kelowna. We were actually in your area for my honeymoon. My husband and I were there in, when was it, Mel? It was October 2020.
No, you should remember, but yeah, it's 2020, just
it was
after COVID hit.
2020. We got, yes, because COVID hit in March 20, it was October 2020. So we were in your area and just love to come back. Beautiful, beautiful people, beautiful part of our country. And I look forward to coming and seeing you all soon. Thanks very much.
Well, thanks for those kind words, Ms. Bergen. We would certainly welcome your attendance out here in the Okanagan and in Vernon. And thank you for recognizing the Chamber's efforts to advocate for our members and businesses and nonprofits throughout the pandemic. It's appreciated. We did send you a number of pre-prepared questions, and you addressed a number of those throughout your opening statements. So thank you for that. I should tell everybody that due to an urgent matter, you do unfortunately have to leave at 12:30. So we've only got you for a few more minutes left, but obviously understanding all the things that are happening in the world right now, that's more than understandable. And we thank the time that you were able to commit to us today, and we'll continue the town hall with Mr. Arnold for the remainder of the 30 minutes. But I will ask another question as I have time to do so. The average cost of a home in Canada is now more than $700,000, as you mentioned inflation. How would Conservatives make housing more affordable in Vernon and across BC?
Well, you pointed out a problem that we've identified and seen while the Liberals have been in government. The housing bubble, really, what is a housing bubble, and the cost of housing, the value of housing increasing, and I would say in not a healthy way. You know, and I think for anybody who owns a home, it is kind of nice to see your house increase in value. But I think for most of us, we also realize it's probably not good. It's not good to buy a home, you know, for $700,000 and a year later it's worth $1 million. As much as that's kind of nice for your peace of mind, it really isn't good for the economy. So Dan, there are a number of issues around. There's affordable housing. That's one issue. But then there's the issue of housing prices out of control. And I would say affordable housing is more of a social issue. How can we ensure that there's housing for low income folks, people with disabilities? There's ways that we can address homelessness. And I know when I was minister under our previous government, we really embraced the Housing First initiative, which helped with homelessness. We believe that there are ways to help encourage affordable housing building. But when we're talking about the problem of the price of housing going through the roof and inflating to a point where we could have a housing bubble, and where it would create real problems when people are trying are going to remortgage, or interest rates go up, or the issue of young people not even being able to dream of buying a house because they're going so high. The real solution is probably two-pronged, and we believe it has to do, and I'll just go over it quickly, housing supply. Cities and municipalities have to be encouraged to address the housing supply issue. They cannot just say, sorry, not our problem, we want a national strategy. How municipalities have got to be able to allow developers to build houses, so we have more houses on the market. That will have an impact immediately on the value. I've seen it happen in my own riding. I've seen where we had a housing crisis and the mayor made a decision that we were going to increase the housing supply by X percent in 2 years. They set out to do it. They got the infrastructure in place. They built the roads, the sewer. They said to builders, come and build houses. and they open up land to do it. We believe that's one of the main things that has to happen. We also have to address the issue of foreign ownership that is, especially in areas like Vancouver, really driving up the cost of housing. So those are a couple of areas. Freeing land. I know in the previous election, we talked about freeing up Crown land to make it available, but to make it available to build houses. We need more houses built. We need more houses on the market so that people can buy those houses. I mean, in our area, in Manitoba, you know, you would be, if you could buy a house for $300,000, you'd be very happy about that. But the more of those smaller and kind of entry-level houses that are built, the better it is. And as I said, we also have to deal with foreign ownership and ensure that that isn't being taken advantage of.
Thank you for that. Just recognizing time, I think you've got about 3 more minutes with us. Obviously, the Russian invasion of Ukraine is top of mind for a lot of people. We had a question come in from one of our members on the call today. So in regards to those issues, what does your party recommend doing about the Russian oligarchs who are key owners of large oil and gas companies in Canada?
There needs to be sanctions. Their assets need to be frozen. There has to be severe consequences for what they've done. But I do think, and again, in the bigger picture, we need to stop our dependency on Russian oil and gas. And I think we also, at the same time, that sends a message to places like China, where they need to know that, like, in this whole endeavor to fight climate change, which is a very worthwhile and noble endeavor, what we have ended up doing is rewarding countries like Venezuela, like Russia, like China is building more coal fire every day than we can keep up with, and shutting down countries like Canada, which actually produce oil and gas in the most environmentally sustainable way, in the most environment, social, government, ESG, sustainable and positive way of any of the countries that are producing oil and gas. Basically, Canada and Norway are the only 2 countries that actually anyone in the world should be buying oil and gas from. Imagine what that would say to Russia. Russia, you want to be Putin, you want to be a bully. You want to invade countries like Ukraine. You want to use your hammer and your military to come down on democratic sovereign countries. The rest of the world is not buying your oil and gas. But as long as countries like Canada, we punish ourselves and say we're not going to build pipelines because, again, I don't understand what benefit we think that's going to be on the world stage in terms of climate change. But as long as we do that, the only country that is winning is Russia. So I know that's a bit around about the Russian oligarchs who are part of what Putin's doing, and they need to be sanctioned and sanctioned strongly. But we have got to stop being naive about our own oil and gas. We have to be champions of it, not just because it's good for us, but it's actually good for the world, good for climate, to reduce GHGs, and it's good on the world stage.
Okay, thank you. I do see that it is 12:30. Not sure if you have time for one more question, but I do understand if you got to leave us as well.
I will go, and I tend to be long-winded, so I won't answer whatever the next one is. I'd love to come back, but Mel and I think very much alike, so he will probably have a lot to contribute. Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Of course, thank you, Ms. Bergen. We do appreciate your time.
Thanks.
Well, Mel, happy to continue with yourself. So thank you so much for dedicating the next half hour with us. And I will begin asking you questions as they come in here. So small businesses have been hit hard during this pandemic, especially those involved in hospitality and tourism. So how do we help small businesses survive and prosper?
How do we help small businesses survive? And I didn't quite catch the last part of it.
Prosper.
And what?
And prosper.
Oh, and prosper, survive and prosper. Great. That's a great question. And I've seen so many businesses right across the riding, especially around Vernon, innovate and become creative through the pandemic, putting their menus online, being able to have their products delivered directly to people in their homes without people having to be out and about. Through that, we've seen how innovative companies and businesses can be, and I think that's one thing we can build on moving forward, is encourage the innovation that can take place. Adversity creates opportunities in some places, and I think this was one time when it has created opportunities for some. But the other piece I also is to get rid of the red tape, like remove some of the barriers that are stopping businesses from growing. They need better access to capital when they want to expand, and especially they need better access to the labor market. We're looking at how immigration can be streamlined. I've heard from many businesses over the recent weeks and months how they have a long list of jobs and shifts to fill, and there's been long lineups and backups within the immigration system that we need to find ways to jump over those hurdles, get people into the country and get them to work at good paying and tax paying jobs, so that we can further our businesses and our economy. Those are just some of the ways, and it's really working together with all levels of government to make sure the opportunities aren't missed. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Another question from one of our members. So what levers does the government have to curb inflation in the short term? Increasing interest rates will only add to the cost of living, perhaps?
Okay, I think, one of the levers that government does have is to curb the spending and the dollars that government is basically just printing and putting out into the market. That increase of money out there only makes the money that was there previously worth less, and that's just going to drive up inflation. And so we need to curb the spending, bring that back under control. $400 million for the pandemic, sometimes some say it's near $600 billion, pardon me. That's an incredible debt that we're going to be passing on to future generations. We can't guarantee what interest rates are going to do. I experienced interest rates of 18 and 20% during my early working career, and it was extremely difficult to get through that stretch. I hope we never see that again for Canada's workers today. But curbing the interest rates, and also our leader mentioned it as well, is curbing the impact of foreign purchases into Canada, whether it's business or residential properties. That competition for what we have available in Canada, some of the best opportunities and the best properties in the world, and we've attracted the global spotlight, and people are coming here, and it's making it more and more competitive for Canadians to buy into that. So we have to look at ways that we can possibly curb that as well without stifling the potential growth that we have here in Canada.
Thank you, Mel. Obviously, the supply chain has been a bit of an issue as of late, especially. So what steps are needed to secure the supply chain so local businesses can continue to access the material and products they require to operate?
Well, I think, thanks, Dan, that's a great question. And we've seen supply chain issues right across the riding, people not able to find vehicles or appliances or materials to build their homes. And that's just increased the demand and driven up the prices as well. One thing I think we should be focusing on is how do we create more of a made in Canada, buy in Canada atmosphere. We know that Canada produces some of the best products in the world, made under the best quality standards, environmental standards, and labor standards. And I think if we can educate Canadians to invest a little bit more in the beginning for those higher quality Canadian and local products, especially our local food, produce, all the interior, Vernon area, the whole Okanagan has some incredible small business manufacturing. And if we can encourage locals to buy local and support those businesses so that there's less dependency on external supply chains, I think we can create more certainty and increase our local business opportunities at the same time.
So you mentioned our food producers. With government financial supports for agriculture remaining low, what measures are needed to enhance agriculture, including value-added processing?
Well, thanks, Dan. It's been great to correspond and meet with a lot of agriculture producers over my 6 years now as member of Parliament. I know with the dairy industry is looking at the possibility of putting a processing plant somewhere in the interior so that not all of the milk has to be sent to the coast or out to Alberta for processing. We're also looking at, we also see more secondary manufacturing of our produce here. Businesses like Okanagan Spirits, the local distillery, using all BC products and as many local products as they can, creating a much higher value because of secondary processing of those products. We need, I think, as government needs to look at how can we incentivize more investment, more opportunities for those local businesses through that secondary processing, and as well as the marketing, and whether that be for the marketing of the actual product itself or whether it's marketing of agritourism. We know that's a growing industry around the world. People want to take part and see how their food is growing. So I think that's an opportunity because the Okanagan is such a desirable place to come and visit. I think there might be great opportunity there as well for the agriculture sector.
Thank you. Another question from one of our members. Is the federal government cutting off funding for the Transcanada pipeline? So what is the impact?
I'm not sure if the Transcanada pipeline, the Trans Mountain pipeline is the pipeline there is one existing line already from the Edmonton area down to Vancouver, and they are doubling that line with a new expansion. As far as I know, they're not cutting off the expansion of that line, and in fact, construction continues as we speak on that to make sure that we can get our Canadian oil and products to Tidewater so that we can sell them internationally. As far as a Transcanada pipeline, if the person was referring to an east-west pipeline, that was really stopped during the current government out of protest, out of Quebec not wanting it to cross their province. But I think we need to look at opportunities to be able to get our oil and gas from Western Canada out to the East Coast, as the leader said, so that we can market that to Europe so that they're less dependent on Russian oil or oil from the Middle East that's produced under less stringent standards than ours here in Canada. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Labor continues to be one of the top issues we hear about from our members. So what steps would you take to improve employers' access to skilled immigrants or temporary foreign workers?
Well, thanks, Dan. We touched on that a little bit earlier, and certainly the immigration process needs to be looked at. I've recently heard from employers that had relied on a system of labor market impact assessments and approval processes that would take them about a year to complete from the initiation to actually putting a worker in place. And because of the slowdowns in the immigration process, partly within Canada, but possibly partly outside of Canada as well, that 1 year process has now become 1.75 years. So from the time they look at putting a worker in a job, instead of just 1 year's time lag, now they're looking at almost 2 years time lag. The immigration process really got slowed down because of COVID. A lot of workers were sent to work from home, didn't return back to the offices for a long time, and it created an incredible backlog of processing times. They've hired some workers to deal with that backlog, but there's still just a huge time lag for temporary foreign workers, for family reunification. Some spousal reunification has been taking longer, but we need to find out where the hurdles are and how can we jump over those hurdles a little quicker. And as I mentioned, in some cases, it's actually processing in other countries, whether it's biometrics or security processing or screening in the country of origin of the foreign worker that is sometimes taking longer than normal. And I think part of that, I can't say for sure, but I think part of that is due to COVID related issues as well.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Do you support the government making further capital investments in airports such as Kelowna International to help them and our local economy move beyond the pandemic?
Well, it's been great to see the recent announcements for YLW, Kelowna Airport there. We know how important it is for people throughout the southern interior, in fact, a lot of the interior, to be able to fly out of Kelowna as an international airport. It's too bad they were slow in reinstating their international status last year, but it's a great airport. The investment in airport and transportation is important, and I support that. We also have to recognize that some airports are actually also privately owned. So we have to, I think we have to be cautious of how the money is spent to make sure that it's going to be efficient and effective, and lead to results that are going to help the economy and Canadians travel where they'd like to travel to.
I'll just remind everybody, we have about 15 minutes left. So if there is a question that you would like, you can submit that through the Q&A and we'll try and get to it as best as possible. How should Canada grow the economy and create jobs while lowering government spending?
Well, I think I touched a little bit on this earlier, but one way is to reduce the red tape for small business. I used to be a small business owner myself, and it was an onerous task every week and every month to complete tax forms, tax reports, and all of the paperwork that was required to hire new employees if you were in through a training program. I think there's a lot of ways that business can step out of the way of businesses wanting to grow, whether that's through approval processes for projects, and maybe not necessarily step out of the way, but at least help them through the process of making sure applications get processed in a reasonable amount of time. And then, as we stated, to make sure that the labor force is there and that labor force is affordable in any way we can, so that there's no restrictions when people want to grow their business.
Here's a question from a member. So do the Conservatives need to merge with the PPC to reignite the right wing in an election? And then maybe that can lead into a broader question about the leadership race and where you see the future of the Conservative Party.
Okay, thanks, Dan. I can't speak for the PPC, but I will speak for our party. I believe we're the only party that can lead the country in a strong fiscal manner. We saw that through the 2007 2008 crunch that took place. Strong fiscal leadership of our former leader, Stephen Harper, and Jim Flaherty, the finance minister, really saw Canada come through a global economic crisis virtually unscathed compared to some other nations around the world. And that it's that strong fiscal management of understanding when is the right time to borrow, when is the right time to spend. And I hope people will see that in our party. We have a broad-based platform. In the 2021 election, we covered everything from housing to mental health to addiction to there was literally something for everyone in our platform. The other party mentioned they were focused really on vaccines and mandates and COVID restrictions. I hope people will see that the Conservative Party of Canada really does want to see what is best for Canadians and Canada as a whole. And hopefully we can draw people into that belief and have them feel like they can be part of that, where everyone's voice and everyone's opinions is respected, not individual, everyone has to have their priority at the top. That's certainly not the case for our party. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Another question from a member. In regards to mandates lifting, it was mentioned that I guess your party agrees with them lifting in accordance with science and data. What are those benchmarks for you, and how do they differ from the current government?
Well, the current government hasn't really set out any benchmarks, and that's what we put forward as an opposition day motion. That's one day in the House where we as the opposition party can put forward a topic for debate for the day, or a motion for debate for the day. And our motion simply asked the government to put forward a plan to remove restrictions and mandates for federally regulated sectors. And unfortunately, that motion was defeated. We think that the government should be providing some sort of plan. Where are the benchmarks so that we can move forward away from the current restrictions and mandates that we have? The health officials and professionals are indicating that this variant is less deadly, less I guess less. It's more, seems to be more infectious, but the results of being infected seem to be less severe. And the current measures have certainly they've hurt our economy, as most business owners, I think, on the call today will understand. And we're still to have an inquiry to find out what the real cost in lives and the economy are out of this whole pandemic response. And if the health advisors and the health professionals can say that the science is there to say that it's safe to open up and safe to remove the mandates, that's where we need to rely on their professional advice. I certainly wouldn't want to be making those decisions on my own or as a party. It's the scientists and the healthcare professionals that can do that.
Thank you, Mr. Arnold. Are there any subsequent consequences for the Liberal government enacting the Emergency Act and then rescinding 2 days later?
Well, thanks, Dan. That's going to be an interesting question. Right now, the House is actually debating the makeup of a review committee that is going to be established to review how the act was invoked and the results of it. And normally when it's a committee that is set up to review government action, it is chaired by an opposition party, and the government doesn't have a majority on that committee as such. And so it's going to be interesting to see how the debate goes on this makeup of this committee. We have put forward amendments on what we think should be there so that we know that we can get to the bottom of the reasoning of that the Prime Minister chose to invoke the act. As our leader stated earlier, the blockades at the border crossing at Coots and the one at the Windsor Bridge had already been removed. Traffic was flowing again, and they had already formed a multi-jurisdictional policing task force here in Ottawa that was starting to move to remove the blockades here. So we didn't feel the Emergencies Act was necessary. So the committee will be able to get much more information on that. And if the government made errors in that, I hope that they will be exposed so that all Canadians will know the results of that committee. Thanks.
Thank you. Question from a member. Do the Conservatives support removing approval process for housing being taken away from cities?
No, this is something we need to work with all levels of government at. The cities, they should have their own strategic plans or development plans moving forward. What we've been encouraging is that as municipalities develop their housing plans, let's make sure they have transit, the access to transit and transit hubs in mind when they're looking at densities. I know living in Salmon Arm, that transit from the downtown area up to the industrial park is a challenge because the shifts in the industrial park start at an earlier hour than transit actually runs. Those pieces are, local, municipal, and provincial. But when federal funding goes into transit projects, we want to make sure those transit projects will link in correctly with housing developments as they're built. And if there's any way we can work with the local or First Nations governments to streamline the process so that cost development charges aren't continuing to rise the way they have been. I've heard, about the costs of developing city lots being just astronomical now compared to what they used to be, driving up housing costs. And that's one area that if we can make land more available and make densities, higher densities more workable, those are areas that we can, I think, work together so that when funding is needed, federal funding is needed to assist with infrastructure projects such as water and sewer, to make sure the money is being spent efficiently with correct densities and the opportunities there to build to keep the housing costs down.
They just came in. So I'm just
yeah, you just right off the teletype, right?
Yeah, exactly. What is the most important issue that needs to be addressed in our Canadian fisheries sector at the moment? What is being done about it now, and what would you like to be seen done better?
Okay, thanks. This one really fits into my fisheries portfolio. I've been on that committee since 2016 when I first arrived here. I think the biggest issue is sustainability of the fisheries, and by that I mean the fish populations and the fishing communities out there, that the harvesters, the processors. We see continuous decline on the west coast of our salmon stocks, and along with that, decline in the number of boats that are able to fish, the number of plants that are able to process fish, and the number of people that are actually able to consume fish caught and processed here in Canada. There's such a multitude of issues, everything from habitat to habitat enhancement, harvest procedures, ocean conditions. We need to look at the opportunities that we have where we can make a difference to increase the fish stocks, the populations, if you want to call them that, so that there is more opportunity for harvest, both or in all sectors, whether that's Indigenous food, social, ceremonial, recreational, commercial. There just needs to be a rebuilding of some of those stocks. There's a lot of gaps in the system out there where the department isn't sure of what the numbers are because the assessments haven't been done. So it's hard to pinpoint exactly one thing. It is so interconnected between every process from basically habitat where fish spawn and hatch out, to the ocean conditions, to the harvest regimes and the types of methods that are used for harvesting. I believe we need to switch to selective gear so that we can move away from actually the bycatch or accidental catch of those species that are endangered or low in numbers, and focus the harvest on the abundant stock. So there's a lot of pieces in there. It's something I could speak all day about if we wanted to drill down into individual pieces of it. But really, it's sustainability. If I was to just if I had to fit it down into one word, that would be it.
Thank you. So time's winding down. Maybe we'll fit in one more question. So Ms. Bergen spoke about incentives for municipalities to encourage more new home building to tackle the housing crisis. What about incentives for rental building development? What can the federal government do to help in that regard?
Well, thanks, Dan. Years ago, we saw incentives removed from some of the rental sector, where other professionals could use the expenses from renovating or converting other properties into rental, residential rental properties. I think that's one area we really need to look at, is incentivizing landlords to invest in rental properties. That's probably one area that I've heard from every sector, from basement suites to single detached homes to apartment buildings. There's fewer and fewer, it seems, investing in the rental market. I can't pinpoint exactly why the reasons are there, but I believe that's where we need to look and see where the hurdles or the roadblocks or the red tape is, so that we can create better incentives for investors to build those targeted rental homes. Because if people can have affordable rental homes, hopefully they can save towards eventually moving into their own personal home as well, away from the rental market. But we have to have that rental market there in order for them to do that. Thanks.
Thank you so much, MP Arnold. We really appreciate you dedicating an hour of your time with us today and answering questions that were important for us and our members. I do want to recognize that you were integral as well for helping to connect us with Ms. Bergen and bringing her to our town hall to connect with our members as well. So thank you so much for that. And I do want to thank our members for joining us today and being engaged and asking questions. We are proud to serve you, and thank you again so much for your support. With that said, I will let everybody get back to the remainder of the day, and thank you so much again.
Well, thank you, Dan, and thank you for the opportunity and everything that the chamber does, and all of the businesses out there that work so hard to build our community to what it is. So thank you all, and have a great day.
Thank you. Take care.